Meanwhile, Inho watched everything from behind while everyone in the station yelled at Dokja to give away his food. It was easy for him to control these people, as he wondered what Dokja would do. Then he approached and told them that Dokja would give him the food because he would have no choice. Dokja agreed to give his food, and Inho felt like he had won. However, not in the way Inho wants it, and he tells them he will give his food for a price, which makes everyone wonder why. He adds that he will sell his food for coins because he didn't trust Inho to give the food fairly. People were murmuring while Dokja told his party he'd also ask them for coins. The woman that Dokja had helped earlier suddenly said that Dokja was right and she was not a charity case. She's Heroine, and she thanked Dokja for saving her. Then, she told Sanga and Hyunseong to understand Dokja's actions. They immediately considered what Dokja endured to get the food and agreed to pay Dokja. Sanga was the first one to trade coins with Dokja, then Gil-young followed. Gil-young gave Dokja extra coins for the chocolate he had eaten earlier, which made Heroine proud of him. Then Heroine told Dokja that the major group had manipulated the food and sent other people outside to look for food only to have them slaughtered. People now think that Dokja's price is too high. Still, he believes that when people are desperate enough, they will eventually buy his food. When nighttime comes, most people are already asleep, but Dokja is still awake even when Hyunseong tells him to rest. Suddenly some people interrupted them, and just like that the day turned into morning. Heroine was surprised to see that Dokja's bag has already empty. It turns out that the minor group had bought the food. However, the major group bought it too. Inho then makes an announcement that the food will be limited to 3 biscuits per day. Dokja and his party watched while people started to protest, and it only got worse when Inho told them to go outside and get food for themselves. Inho told everyone that he changed his mind because of Dokja. It turns out the major group had bought half of the food, and he told everyone that he would give more food to people that have skills to offer. He did it while activating his insight skill to entice people. Dokja realized that Inho had incited skills and now understood that Inho wanted people to turn against him. Heroine told Dokja that his intention to weaken the major group by encouraging transactional business is good, but it'll be pointless if the major group also buys the food. Dokja told her that he had gained more coins because of it, making her question whether his party actually trusted him. When Heroine knew that Dokja had sold all the food, she became agitated. Suddenly Gil-young offered to give Dokja some food he had, but Dokja refused. Right after, Dokja advised his party to eat all of their food for reasons he didn't tell. Meanwhile, people were desperate to get food, but the major group's price was too high. After a while, Dokja was alone, standing at the rails toward Yaksu Station, planning for something. Then Heroine suddenly revealed to him that people who went that way never came back. When Dokja climbed the platform, she thanked him again for saving her life yesterday. As he stood up, Heroine showed him the guy who tried to rape her and told him to stay away from him because she was the one who would kill him. Dokja checked her character profile, and when he looked, she didn't seem to have any constellations yet. When suddenly, something in her view shocked her. She's mad seeing the major group sending older people and a woman outside, knowing full well that they have little chance of survival. Dokja tried to stop her because he knew they would suffer from starvation if they stayed. Looking deeper, Dokja found out that Heroine had a crouching figure attribute. It was a rare attribute but had the most significant effect on the avatar. Dokja managed to stop her, but she couldn't believe that he had told her just to sit and watch. He told him that her effort would be redundant because of the food shortage while considering making her a companion after seeing her profile. Dokja offered to deal with the food issues and told her to wait because he believed Bae-young would appear. And true to his word, the station's darkness is suddenly broken by a bright stroke of light, and everyone immediately knows it is the Dokkaebi. However, it was not Bae-young, and Dokja had a good guess why Bae-young would get disciplined. The Dokkaebi had black fur and gold garment. He expressed how everyone was so calm in the scenario, so he snapped his fingers, and suddenly, every food in stock was floating. Everyone watched hopelessly as their food floated in the air, and then the Dokkaebi snapped his fingers. Suddenly the food disappeared, and everyone was rattled by it. And not long after, a new scenario called Survival Fee appears, and everyone will be charged to pay 100 coins every day until the end of the main scenario. After the Dokkaebi disappeared, Inho gathered everybody and told them he would only give food to those who joined the search team. He was upset because he didn't expect the food to be gone, which makes him wonder if Dokja knew it would happen. Dokja thought about Inho becoming suspicious of him, but if he couldn't prove it, there was nothing to worry about. He told Heroine that he just thought about what the Dokkaebi might do to make them miserable. As Dokja saw the notification bar he didn't expect, they added a survival fee, and began to wonder if the contract he signed with Bae-young affected the story. Suddenly, Hyunseong called him. He told Dokja they should join the search, but Dokja replied that they needed to find a new source. When Dokja looked at the railway, everyone suddenly realized his intention. Dokja told his party that they'd go to hunt monsters, and a few minutes later Dokja and his party were on the railway, planning to hunt by following the trails. Dokja was surprised Inho didn't try to get in his way, and he now knew that every time he earned a character's trust, impressed them, or read their thinking, his level of understanding increased. Inho was suspicious of Dokja and asked if one of his men could join his group. As they walked along the railway, dead bodies were scattered everywhere, and it turned out that Myung-go was the one that joined their group, and he was terrified of the dead bodies while everyone looked at him in disbelief. As they continued to walk further, Dokja knew that Myung-go wasn't a threat to them, and Hyun-seong was also worried about Heroine. He then proposed to send the woman and child back because of how dangerous the road was and argued with Heroine. Then Dokja stopped their banter by saying everyone could be strong if they increased their stats and told Gil-young to show it to them. Gil-young touched the ground, and a light strand appeared from his fingertip. And at the end of the strand, a cockroach told Gil-young they would be safe for another 100 steps. It turns out Gil-young has the skill to get him able to find and talk to bugs. He told everyone not to worry about him, and as they continued their journey, Sangha found a wall that got in their way. When Sangha touched the wall, suddenly a new sub-scenario appeared, and behind that wall were dead monsters scattered on the ground. The monsters were ground rats, and Dokja knew that Yoo Jung-hyuk was the only one who had killed them. However, the scenario told them to hunt the monsters, so Dokja asked Heroine if she had good fighting skills. A few minutes later, Dokja made swords using the bone of the ground rats, and it impressed a few constellations. He then advised them to invest the coins in strength because he didn't expect everyone to survive the scenario. Suddenly they heard a rattling sound from afar. Then a pack of ground rats appeared from the darkness, and Hyun-seong was the one that drew his sword. He stabbed one of them right in the stomach while others approached Heroine. But Heroine can handle herself and kills a few rats with a single swing. However, she failed to sweep them cleanly, leaving a rat that survived and fled. Gil-young was already standing in front of the rat with his weapon, and he whacked it in the head. And Sangha stabbed the rat in the back of the neck, killing it instantly. Meanwhile, Dokja calmly fought the rats and managed to slice one of them in half. He was surprised that his party could fight this well, and at last, he could kill 4 rats, while Heroine was able to kill 2, and Hyun-seong killed 3 of them. Dokja was jealous because of his strength, and he had to invest in it to increase his stats. And when he realized that Hyun-seong owned a starter pack that could increase his stats and give them weapon skills, he got more jealous. Meanwhile, Sangha wondered how to eat the rats, and Dokja assured her they would find a way. But it only got him glares from his party. Dokja wondered if his replies were too calm, and then Hyun-seong asked if he knew the future. That made Dokja ponder his options since he couldn't just answer truthfully. But before he could answer, Myung-go suddenly screamed and got everyone's attention. He was glad he could dodge the question when a rat dragged Myung-go, and Sangha tried to pull him back. However, Sangha was also got dragged with him, and they both disappeared into the underground. Hyun-seong tried to get to them, but it was too late. A few moments later, Hyun-seong and Heroine were wondering if everything would be okay as they looked at the gaping hole in the railway. It turns out Dokja took Gil-young with him down to follow the rat because his skill is useful in this case. He also told Hyun-seong to watch for Heroine because she looked tired. Hyun-seong looked at Heroine's neck, which was still bruised, and now, looking at her, he knew Dokja was right. Meanwhile, Dokja and Gil-young walked through the dark tunnel with Gil-young as the guide. This place is so dark that no one can tell where they're going. Suddenly, Gil-young asked if Dokja had intentionally let Sangha and Myung-go go. He knew it because he saw Dokja just silently watching it happen. When Dokja didn't deny it, a few constellations was not happy. Dokja knew Gil-young was too smart and couldn't lie to him, so he told him that the ground rats tended to hoard their catch. They collect food and rare items in their lair. Gil-young immediately knows that Dokja wants one of the items. However, Gil-young knew it wasn't Dokja's true intention because he had saved him on the train. Gil-young trusts Dokja but doesn't know what he sees in him. Dokja knew this new world was full of people that'll take advantage of him. And when they almost arrived, Gil-young suddenly stopped. He asked if Dokja was a god or a protagonist. Dokja immediately denied it and only said that he knew about this world. Then Gil-young asked if there was a reward after all the scenarios were over. Gil-young was trembling when Dokja wasn't answering. At the same time, Dokja thought about people who became crazy because of their suffering in this new world, like Namwoon. And then, some people became violent and beat up older women. At last, there are people like Gil-young that become optimistic, and that's why Dokja agrees with him. As he held Gil-young, the field shifted, revealing a grim place with giant roots. There's a box in the middle that glowed purple, and suddenly the sub-scenario changed. Something scratched from inside, and Dokja immediately covered Gil-young's mouth because something else was around the box. There was a growl from afar, and then a blue light appeared before the box, making the ground rats afraid. Then Dokja and Gil-young heard Myungo and Sanga argue in the corner, tied up with roots. It was revealed that Myungo was the one that stole Sanga's bike because he wanted to drive her home. Everything made sense to Dokja why Myungo was not driving his fancy car, and their arguments got heated when they shouted at each other until Dokja had enough. Dokja decided to improvise and aimed his spike. There was a moment of silence before Dokja finally threw his spike, and it bolted through the air. Dokja aimed it toward Myungo, and he immediately noticed. However, the spike only went on top of his head, and they stopped arguing. They noticed Dokja and Gil-young in front of them. While Dokja expected something to come, the wall where he put his spike started cracking. Myungo and Sanga noticed it and got alerted. Meanwhile, the bugs got hit and died instantly. But Gil-young is the only one who knows, while Dokja observes when the rats tremble in fear. He knew the black flame flaring all over the lair, and something appeared in the center of the dark root. It was a tall creature with a skull face hidden in a hood, and he had many tentacles. The creature is called the Warden of the Dark. Then, Dokja noticed the bugs had died, and Gil-young must have felt it because he suddenly became nauseous. He told Gil-young to rest when he approached Sanga and Myungo. Dokja just calmly walked past the Warden. He quickly cut the roots that bind Sanga and Myungo. He was surprised that his knife was blunt from a few cuts. The Warden quickly noticed Dokja and his party, so Dokja told them to stay back. He knew the rat was collecting items as a sacrifice to the demonic species because they were stronger. Dokja doesn't intend to fight the Warden, and when the Warden speaks, Dokja is at a loss. It started to pour his aura of fear toward Dokja, but his fourth wall skill immediately activated and blocked it. Dokja was saved from the fear effects, but it just angered the Warden. The flames got more extensive, and Gil-young was still weak. Even when Dokja doesn't want to fight it, he has no choice. Then suddenly, Sanga says something about his mother. Dokja was surprised that Sanga was still near him, but she seemed to understand what the Warden said. She was trying to understand what the Warden had said. It turns out that Sanga had interpretation skills, and she told Dokja that she wanted them to be a mother. However, the Warden only pointed at Myungo, and one of his tentacles moved. The tentacle moved at a lightning-fast pace, and he shoved it in Myungo's mouth. Dokja and Sanga were startled to see Myungo swallow something from it. Immediately, Dokja understood that the Warden was trying to impregnate other species with their offspring and ran toward them. He ran towards Myungo and immediately cut the tentacle, making the Warden scream in pain. It immediately attacks Dokja with other tentacles, but Dokja is quick to block it, but Sanga is worried. However, Dokja managed to fight it off, but his sword couldn't take that many hits, so it broke. It broke in the middle of a fight, leaving Dokja with nothing to defend himself. When the Warden slammed one of his tentacles toward Dokja, he immediately jumped away, and it hit the ground. Dokja knew he could not defeat the Warden, so he called out to the Dokkaebi. As he tried to escape the attacks, the Dokkaebi appeared, and Dokja asked him to hand over an item in his mail. However, the Dokkaebi refused to help, until Dokja reminded him that the constellations were wary of the scene and demanded Biryu the Dokkaebi help Dokja. Without much choice, Biryu opened the mail while Dokja kept running from tentacles that were gunning for him. It was an item Dokja got from an auction house where he traded Ichthyosaur's nucleus back in the belly of it. He gets what he wants, a sword named Broken Faith, which he summoned and slowly appears in his hand. Dokja swung the sword immediately, but the Warden stopped attacking him. The Warden is shocked by Dokja's sword, and Biryu underestimates him. His sword is broken, and only a piece of the blade was left. However, Dokja already knew all of this, and he ignored Biryu's laugh. Dokja focused his energy on the sword, and he started to glow. Both Biryu and the Warden were shocked when the sword glowed brighter. Dokja immediately attacks the Warden, and a bright white light flashes brightly when he does. Biryu was surprised. Back in the belly of the Ichthyosaur, Dokja also bought skills from Gil-young, and one of them is called the White Star Aura. His sword reacts to this specific skill. As a result, the energy inside the sword increased until it was covered in bright light. The Warden refused to lose and prepared his next attack, but Dokja swung his sword first and sliced the Warden's tentacles aimed toward him. The Warden screamed in pain as the tentacles fell to the ground. However, having a good sword doesn't make Dokja a good swordsman, and he loses too much mana. He immediately activated his reading skill. The Warden attacked Dokja again, and he barely dodged the attack as he tried to activate his bookmark skill. The pages were flipped until he decided to activate bookmark number 2. A green silhouette started to encase Dokja as he activated one of Hyunseong's weapon skills. His powers increased as he ran towards the warden and cut his tentacle again. The warden still tried to fight him. Dokja, now accompanied by Hyunseong's shadow, sliced through the tentacles on the other side. He holds the sword with both hands and leaps toward the warden, knowing it always takes a break after each attack. Dokja moved quickly as he sliced the warden right in the middle and landed on the ground behind it. The warden screamed in pain. His party watched it happen, and Sanga told them that the warden wondered how Dokja knew his attack strategy. The warden crashes towards the ground as Dokja tells him he needs more reading. The constellations were mesmerized as the warden lay on the ground with a massive wound on its stomach. At the same time, Biryu was surprised to see an ether sword so early in the scenario. But Dokja told him it was not the actual blade and could only be used once. Then he asked for the reward because he finished the sub-scenario. They received 500 coins, and Biryu asked if Dokja wanted to kill the warden. Dokja refused to do it by lying that he didn't believe in killing, even when the reward was enormous. Instead, he was going to open the box, so he kicked Biryu out of his way. But suddenly, someone stabbed the warden. Myungo is the one that did it, and he smirked when the demon died. He was happy that he did it. He bragged about it in front of Dokja. However, in the middle of his hysterical screams, he got a notification that told him that the Demon King would curse him. Dokja doesn't kill the warden because he knows he'll be the target of the Demon King and will be tortured. But Sanga and Gilyong admired him, and he just smiled back at them. He asked them to open the box together while Myungo regretted his choice. Sanga and Gilyong got a bracelet and a shield. Dokja expected that Yoo-Jung-hyuk already took the good stuff, but they still had one more box. So he opened it. Inside that box was a mana brazier, and Dokja knew it was a crucial item in their sub-scenario now. Dokja used that item to cook the ground rat's leg with the lighter, and the three of them drooled over it because it smelled so good. He took the first bite, and everyone was anticipating his reaction. The meat tasted delicious, so he gave each Sanga and Gilyong a piece of leg. Dokja just experienced something that he could only read before, making everything tastier. Then, he suddenly heard Myungo's stomach make a noise. Myungo awkwardly asked to join them, and when he sat among them, Dokja told him that he'd need energy to fight off his curse. All four of them eat in delight when Sanga asks Dokja how he knew all this. Sanga assumed he knew because he read a lot of web novels, and she was embarrassed that she couldn't do much. But Dokja would only be able to defeat it because she understood the warden. Apparently, Sanga noticed that Dokja wanted the box for a specific reason. It turns out it was a random item box. To deflect the question, he praised Sanga for her ability to read the language. As they finished eating, Sanga encouraged Dokja to keep whatever item in that box for himself. Dokja reached for something out of his pocket and took out the warden's core. He put it inside the box along with Broken Faith. He knew if he put random items inside, it'll turn into other things that could be rare or powerful. Biryu is unaware of the box until it is too late because Dokja already places a low-grade object inside and is already in the process of becoming a high-grade item. The box glowed a blinding purple light. Biryu immediately shut down the stream as the box got brighter and started to rattle. Dokja wants a weapon higher than a grade, and suddenly, a light beam shot from the box as the item appeared. Dokja knew the random item box could threaten the scenario. That's why Biryu was panicking. When he asked Sanga and Gilyong to open the box, they were surprised to see a beautiful sword. The sword is called Unbreakable Faith and was a constellation artifact above any legendary graded items. Dokja wanted to keep it, and both Sanga and Gilyong agreed, so when everything was settled, he asked them all to head back. However, Gilyong told him that all the bugs were dead, so no one could lead them back. Then Gilyong told Dokja that there was still one bug. His body immediately tensed up, and he started to murmur strange language. Both Dokja and Sanga were worrying, but Gilyong didn't hear them. Suddenly a loud rumble came from above and shook the whole place. Gilyong's eyes turned white, and his nose started to bleed. A big earthquake happened on the surface too. The lair started to shake again, and it turned out Gilyong was calling one of the giant bugs outside. It was a mantis, and Gilyong called it towards them. Knowing that Gilyong was calling the monster above, Dokja immediately told him to stop. He repeatedly told him to stop, and once he did, the insect above got released from the influence. The mantis was confused for a second before running away. Meanwhile, the roof of the lair was about to collapse, and Dokja couldn't believe that Gilyong was the one causing it. Realizing what had happened, Dokja warned him not to use it until he said so. Then he suggested they wait until other bugs appeared. But Sanga had an idea. She could help find a way back because she has a similar skill to Gilyong. She has the skill to find a way by following a gold thread. and when Dokja asked her about her constellation, he knew immediately that she had added a contract not to disclose that information. When Dokja tries to find out through his character profiling skill, only to find out that her information is still collecting. Dokja was surprised because he hadn't seen this type of message before, and then suddenly, a bright yellow flash appeared. It was Baehyung, and he cheerfully greeted everybody. When they were back at the railway, he gave Heroine the cooked rat's leg so she could recover. As they walked back, Baehyung talked to Dokja through Dokkaebi communication, and he was the only one that could hear it. Baehyung explained that he was called to the management because he shut the channel and prolonged his commercials. But Baehyung smirked and chose not to care. And as they kept walking, both of them silently talked about the random item box that reminded Baehyung of his past. It turns out the box was there because Baehyung is too greedy. Suddenly, Heroine noticed that Dokja got another item as well. Meanwhile, Hyunseong, in the back, was wiping the shield with a happy face. He started to trust Dokja, and Heroine became jealous of them because she didn't get any items. When they arrived at the station, everyone seemed busy murmuring among themselves. Some of them were depressed and agitated. Apparently, some of them need more coins to pay the survival fee. A woman was begging everyone to give her child coins, and one of them wanted to pay for it. And Dokja and Heroine got their attention to a woman looking for her sister who joined the search team. However, the man supposed to look out for them acted all high and mighty. It makes Heroine's attribute triggered. Suddenly, Inho appeared and made things worse when he used his skill to convince people that he had the most coins. He smirked when everyone in the station started to circle Dokja and the party. People started to beg him for coins, and Inho tried to guilt-trip him to help. Dokja knew he would lose 2,000 coins if he helped them, so he wondered if they deserved his help in the first place. He remembered the main point of the scenario is to take responsibility for yourselves. And then, Baehyung appears on the screen and reminds them that the time is dwindling. Dokja closed his eyes for a moment when the constellations were waiting impatiently until he made up his mind and glanced at the crowd. He decided he would not play along with Inho's game and asked the people why he should help them. Inho was laughing at the back, knowing Dokja would do that. He told the people they would have survived if Dokja hadn't sold his food with coins. And immediately, everyone started to get angry at him. His party tried to calm the masses, but Inho encouraged Dokja to give the coins. But Dokja wasn't afraid as all his party surrounded him. All of Inho's men started attacking Dokja, so he held his sword tightly and drew it from its sheath. When one of them raised his weapon at Dokja, he immediately cut both hands in one swipe. Everyone was shocked to see his hand fly in the air while the man fell to the ground and screamed in pain. Dokja expressed how pathetic they were for blaming him for a situation that they had created. When Dokja profiles the man's character, he knows he is too powerful to be a regular gangster. Then he turned back and looked at the people, scared because of what he had done. He told them it wasn't his fault they were stuck in this situation. Dokja knew they were scared of the major group because they were more robust, so he questioned why they were that way. Upon hearing it, Inho flinched, and people were murmuring until one of them was brave enough to question it. When Inho tried to explain, Dokja cut it off and stated the fact that their numbers were depleted quickly. Another argued that it was because of the monsters, but Dokja doubted it. Dokja called them idiots for overlooking that only the Chudu gang had survived and got stronger every time they were back. He turned Inho's words against him and said one would get coins if they killed someone. Inho knew all along that by killing someone, you earned coins, and he still tried to deny it when the people confronted him about it. Baehyung was getting excited while people were getting angry at Inho. Dokja screamed and told everyone to get the coins for themselves while Inho smirked behind one of his men. He sidestepped and pointed his sword toward the major group. This is the way of the world right now, and the people were trembling, realizing that Dokja was right. They began attacking each other until it turned into an all-out way when they killed each other. They used any weapon that they could find and fought the major group. Dokja and his party were caught in the middle of it. The gang tried to attack Dokja. Using his newly acquired sword, Dokja slashed them into pieces. Blood was scattered all over the place after Dokja cut off their limbs. Then he stood over them as they were hopelessly asking for help. Suddenly somebody stuck a sword through one of the man's mouths and killed him. It was Heroine who had killed the man who tried to rape her. And because of it, her attributes began to evolve. The crouching figure inside of her is finally awake. Her attribute evolved into a judge of evil, and a red aura enveloped her body. As she manifested a crimson red eye, a big red sword appeared and hovered over her head. Dokja was shocked, seeing that she had one of the most potent judges as an attribute. Then Heroine told him that she'll fight the rest of the gang. A notification said that she'll always fight alongside Dokja. Heroine took a deep breath and activated her personal skill, and a colossal holographic scale appeared behind her. And it tips to the right. The constellation permitted her to use the skill, and her power immediately increased. Meanwhile, Inho got beat up by one of the minor groups. He was wondering where all of his men had gone, then his attention was drawn to Heroine, that bursting red light all over the station, and she slaughtered everyone that tried to attack her. She even brilliantly defended herself when someone tried to strike her from behind. Heroine immediately stabbed him and sliced through his right shoulder. Meanwhile, Dokja and the rest of the people were watching in shock, seeing the carnage she made. They're all surprised that she managed to kill all of them and, at last, pointed her sword at Inho. While he just sat on the ground helplessly, he glanced back towards his men, that bled to death in the flood, while Heroine and Dokja stared at each other, and then Dokja nodded. Inho glanced back at Dokja as Heroine slashed him right in the middle of his face. He could not believe he could lose to him, but before he gathered his thoughts, Heroine had already cut him right in his face. Blood gushed out of his face as he fell to the ground and died. And after that, the time of the survival fee arrived, and everyone that doesn't have enough coins got killed instantly. Dokja and his party watched it in horror when they heard the people were slowly dying. Meanwhile, Heroine could not stand on her own feet and kneeled on the ground. Dokja reached out to her and said that the scenario had just begun. She accepted his hand and stood up with his help. His party started to approach her, and then, after the survival fee is collected, a new notification window appears. It says that they had seen and gone to the place where the second scenario would start. In the morning, the remnants of the war were still scattered all over Jumho Station. Dokja and his party parted ways with the remaining people of the station. But Dokja knew they could defend themselves, so they started to walk away with Heroine as their new member of the party. Nyongho left without a trace, but Dokja wasn't worried about him and told everyone to go to the next destination. Suddenly, Heroine punched Dokja on his arm and transferred 1,500 coins. She gave it as a share because she thought she was the one who earned the most coins because of last night. He told her that she should keep it for herself because he knew he was the one who got the most coins, as Baehyung already gave him his share. Because of last night's battle, many constellations had gifted so much coins, and Dokja collected them from Baehyung, who was hoping that he would forget about their contract. With over 23,000 coins in his possession, Dokja invests most of it in his stats. Dokja knew that the following scenario would be an excellent place to earn more coins. As they step into the territory, the second scenario is activated. The scenario is called the Encounter, and they were told to get through the tunnel and get to the first shelter. Heroine is wondering where the shelter is located, but Dokja already knows. As he remembered the map of the railway, their next stop was Chungnyeoro, and they all fight tooth and nail as they fight the ground rats that keep attacking them in the tunnel until they come out of it fully tired. Dokja let everyone rest at Dongguk University. However, Hyunseong proposed that they keep going because they were already closed with Chungnyeoro. So Dokja reveals they might not get any rest after seeing that on their way toward Chungnyeoro, people and ground rats were dying, and only Yoo Jung-hyuk could do such things. And with that, Hyunseong agreed to him and offered to look for things that could be useful. Sangha was asking Heroine to join her as well. Dokja turned and looked at them awkwardly, but then he realized that they were about to go to the bathroom. Hyunseong and Gilyong want to go to the bathroom as well, but when they arrived at the bathroom, Heroine noticed that Dokja wasn't with Hyunseong. He told her that Dokja was going outside, where the air was still poisonous. Dokja was running while holding his breath. He specifically told them to get some rest at Dongguk because it was the shortcut toward the statue of the great monk Samyeong. When Heroine asked Hyunseong why Dokja would go outside, he told them he was off on a pilgrimage. Dokja silently paid his respect to the statue, and just like that, the constellations gave him coins. While Baehyung was wondering what he'd done, suddenly, Dokja jumped off the ground and swung his sword to the back to gain momentum. Baehyung was panicking as he saw what Dokja was about to do as he swung it towards the statue, and a loud cracking sound can be heard as he does it. Afterward, Dokja was silently eating as Baehyung nagged him about destroying an idol statue of a constellation. He finally told Baehyung to relax. He knew that all idol statues contained power and items of the constellations, and he needed the great monk's skill to go to Chungnyeoro. He did it all based on reading Tessa. Returning to the station, he argued about the constellation that Dokja antagonized by destroying the statue. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he met Heroine and Hyunseong. He told them that he got some items for them. Heroine got a robe, and Dokja told her that it belonged to the great monk Samyeong. She had no idea who that was, but Sangha, who got a praying bead, knew he was a legend in Korean history. Heroine found out these items had the power of the monk, and Dokja shamelessly claimed that he was praying at the statue, and then these items fell down from the sky. He tries to say nice things about the monk, hoping that he will take the bait and that all his party are considering his words. And because of his sugar-coated praise, his party were grateful to the monk, and a notification said that the constellation had forgiven Dokja. While Byung was speechless, watching as Dokja managed to win over the constellation by praising him to his party. Dokja knew the constellations thrive in recognition and fame. When Heroine was happy about the robe, Dokja was given 100 coins. When they approach Chungmoro, Dokja tells everyone to stay alert because Gilyong used his ability, and they haven't encountered any rats. As they stepped further, a new sub-scenario appeared, and Dokja told everybody to keep their guard. The sub-scenario is called Illusory Prison, and they must escape it in an hour. The wind started to hit them when it began. And then there's a howl from afar before the wind for more extensive and faster. They were engulfed in darkness, and Dokja could hear his mom call him. He felt something of the voice kept searching for him until he saw his mom and she told him that he hadn't seen anything. He suddenly understood what was happening, and his fourth wall skill activated. It fights off the effect until he can regain his consciousness. Dokja realized this zone would drive people crazy with their trauma, so he told his party to keep it together. But it was too late because his party were already consumed by their agony, except Sangha. The beads on her hand glowed, and she was protected by it. Dokja immediately ran toward her. He told her to watch his back when he destroyed the area, and Sangha agreed. And as they stood back to back, Dokja warned Sangha that he was about to start. Dokja obtained a skill from destroying the monk's statue, which could block the illusionary prison when he activated it. As the air cleared, the skill still affected Hyunseong and Gilyong, while Heroine suddenly ran toward Dokja and attacked him. Dokja can barely avoid the sword, and when he looks at her eyes, they glow red as a sign of demon slaying. He gave her the robe for this reason, but it failed. So, he immediately jumped behind her and hit her pressure point, instantly knocking her down. He drew his sword and told everyone to stay alert when transparent figures appeared from the ground. Dokja was facing one of the ghost species called Spectre on his own. Meanwhile, Hyunseong was abruptly waking up from his nightmare in the military, and he got a headache as a result. While from the railway, Dokja collected the Spectre Spirit Stone after killing them. Sangha explained that they were ambushed by illusionary prison, and Dokja was the one that had saved them. Hyunseong thanked Dokja for it when Gilyong woke up and wobbled as he tried to stand up. Dokja noticed his headache and remembered when he was crouching on the ground and apologizing to her mom. He realized that Gilyong probably had the worst trauma, so he carefully stroked his hair, and Gilyong immediately hugged him and cried. Sangha told everyone that they almost got to Chungnyeoro when she saw the light at the end of the tunnel. He was worried because they were not ready to fight when suddenly someone approached them. She was wearing a hood as she drew her sword and told them this was their area. Both Dokja and Sangha immediately recognized her from the stream that Byung showed them on the train, and Dokja recognized her as the main character of Tessa as well. She is the only survivor of Tipung Girls' High School. Jehai removed her hood when she noticed the spirit stone in Dokja's hand. She was surprised they arrived after defeating the Spectre because she knew only the master knew about it. When he looked at her character profile, she still had the same constellation as the one he read in Tessa, the god of naval warfare. And she is a naval commander and the only reason why Yoo Jung-hyuk rushed to Chungnyeoro. She will be helpful in the next scenario. They all followed her toward the station, and with that, a notification appeared that their second scenario had been completed, and the rewards are accumulated. When they arrived at Chungnyeoro, Sangha was scared by the atmosphere in the station. While Dokja noticed that there were a lot of other channels because the scenario got bigger. One of the men inside the station noticed their arrival and condescendingly greeted Jehai. But it turns out that they were drunk out of their mind and started to question Dokja and his party. They treated Sangha horribly, so Jehai warned them to be polite. She glared at them as she shoved her sword toward their face, and just like that, they all left in a hurry. After that, Jehai intended to leave, but Dokja immediately asked her if Yoo Jung-hyuk was around, shocking her. She glared at Dokja and became suspicious of him, so she prepared to draw the sword again. Dokja told her that he was Yoo Jung-hyuk's companion, but she didn't believe it. He wants to know where Yoo Jung-hyuk is because he has a message for him. She thought about her options and then decided to talk to Yoo Jung-hyuk, a boy sitting silently in the corner to look out for Dokja and his party. The boy was surprised and beamed brightly, knowing Dokja was a friend of Yoo Jung-hyuk. Watching how happy the boy looked, Dokja answers him similarly. After a while, Dokja and his party rested at the station as the boy told them how Yoo Jung-hyuk became their leader. Dokja yawned at last after hearing it and told the boy that he heard it all. He felt sorry for him because Yoo Jung-hyuk wasn't saving them from monsters because of the goodness of his heart but to gain the trust of Jehai. Then the boy told Hyun-seong how Jae would hunt the monsters, and Jung-hyuk cooked it. Hyun-seong diligently writes it all down. When the boy mentioned a landlord coalition, he began to take an interest in it, and they had met with the men earlier. As the boy led them upstairs toward the bathroom, Dokja knew the coalition well because he read Tessa, and when Sanga asked what room they were talking about, the boy points toward a safe zone in the middle of the room, and two people fight for it. The boy told them it was part of their scenario, and they'll eventually know what it was all about. He explained that the coalition controlled most of the rooms, and Dokja asked if Jung-hyuk could do something about it. The boy looked sad when Jung-hyuk straight up abandoned them, and now Dokja had to find out why Jung-hyuk drifted away from his path in the third round. When they arrived at the entrance to the bathroom, there were a lot of people begging to be let inside. The man that guards the entrance told everyone to stand back when suddenly Gil-young ran away. He slipped through the lines of people trying to go to the bathroom, which made him tripped. His hand touched the safe zone, and people were scared as they looked at him. And green light turned red as the guards leaned over to watch Gil-young closer. He started questioning Gil-young about his parents while Dokja and the party tried to catch up to him. Weapons start to appear and point toward Gil-young. He was frozen in his place when he heard the weapon click. It was a stigma that Pildugong had, and right now, it pointed to automatic weapons toward Gil-young. A notification says that Pildu wants 500 coins for payment, and one of the men reaches out demanding it from Gil-young. The weapons are alive and ready to fire, while everyone behind the red line just stands by and pities Gil-young. Dokja told Sanga to look out for Heroine, and then he approached Gil-young. The man turned to him and asked for 500 coins, a straight heist. That made Dokja wonder why Jung-hyuk let all of this happen while Jae met with Jung-hyuk to inform him what had happened. Dokja remembered the 10 evils as the main antagonist in every regression, and Pildugong is one of them. The quota in the bathroom is 70 people, so there are not many rooms left. When Dokja was able to get Gil-young back behind the line, he asked them why they locked the place. The man told him it wasn't free anymore, so Dokja agreed to pay, but he wanted to pay directly to Pildugong. Thanks to his profiling skill, he knew none of them in Pildu, so he started to call him out. Dokja intentionally stepped into their zone, and the weapons were automatically activated. But he just kept strolling inside until someone that sat in the corner of the room stopped him. He was reading a magazine, and without looking up, he threatened Dokja if he moved again. Dokja pointed out that he just wanted to pay the money so he didn't have to be scared. It took Pildu's attention. He puts down his magazine and wears his hat. When Dokja read his character profile, he wasn't surprised to know that the man was strong and also smart. Dokja pondered his options of striking a deal or killing him, but Pildu had already noticed his hand that grabbed the sword. Then Dokja saw his party being surrounded by Pildu's men, so he raised his hands and asked to be a tenant. But Pildu refused it because he wasn't a part of the coalition. Dokja knew it, so he offered him intel in exchange for a room inside the safe zone. Pildu wasn't expecting anything until Dokja mentioned Jung-hyuk, and immediately everyone was alerted. In Tessa, Jung-hyuk was supposed to fight the coalition. Pildu asked him what he knew about Jung-hyuk. Dokja told him that they were companions that had fought for their life. Pildu activated his calculation skills and told Dokja that he got something to lose if Dokja ran away. Dokja knew he couldn't force his will, so he gave up and walked away. When Pildu stopped him, Dokja thought that he had the upper hand, but apparently he just asked him for coins. However, Pildu asked for 1,000 coins, and Dokja refused to pay. The weapon started to shoot Dokja, and all his party warned him to run toward the crowd. That instant, a loud explosion blinded everyone for a moment while Dokja tried to protect himself. But the fire didn't get to him because Hyun-seong jumped in front of him to protect him. However, his power was limited, and Dokja knew his party were not ready to fight. But then he realized something, so he immediately told Pildu to stop. Pildu was alerted when Dokja told him he would die in his seat if they fought right now, and as they talked, someone approached them. Just as Dokja finished talking, Jung-hyuk and Jae walked into the room. Jung-hyuk was unimpressed by what he saw when he spotted Dokja waving at him. His face lit up, and he became irritated. Pildu was shocked that Dokja actually knew him. Dokja activated his Omniscient Reader Viewpoint skill as he stared at Jung-hyuk, who was surprised to see him alive. While Jae was looking back and forth in disbelief that Dokja and Jung-hyuk knew each other. They stared at each other as Dokja asked him how he had been. Dokja then asked him if he could confirm that they were, in fact, companions and helped him gain access to the bathroom. Jung-hyuk was silent because he couldn't break his words. Everyone was surprised that Dokja could talk over him, and Jung-hyuk finally drew his sword. Afterward, Dokja smiled brightly at Jung-hyuk, who was stupefied in an empty corridor. Jung-hyuk came at the right time to save them even when he knew Jung-hyuk didn't like him. though Jung-hyuk was annoyed as he never thought that Dokja was still alive. On the other hand, Jae was shocked that they knew each other. Dokja knew Jung-hyuk never considered him a companion, and he just silently threatened Pildu to let him and his party use the bathroom. Through Jung-hyuk's eyes, he says that Dokja's death is preferable to him than being alive. Dokja was angry and wanted to punch him in the face, but when he checked Jung-hyuk's full stats, he knew he would get beaten up instead. Jung-hyuk in the novel is not this strong, which makes Dokja wonder why Jung-hyuk got stronger. Because Dokja stared at Jung-hyuk too long, he got called out, so Dokja snapped back, which annoyed Jung-hyuk even more, and he wondered if he could kill Dokja so he doesn't have to deal with him. Suddenly, Heroine woke up and got everyone's attention. Jung-hyuk noticed that Dokja had his own companion. However, he was disappointed at Dokja because as he used Sage's Eyes skill, he saw that Dokja could only help a little in improving Hyun-sung's abilities. Dokja, who activated his skill to read Jung-hyuk's mind, was annoyed because he was just an ordinary mundane that could only know the future. And then something caught Jung-hyuk's attention, and he couldn't believe what he saw. Dokja got curious as to which one of his party Jung-hyuk saw and wondered if it was Heroine. He wanted to ask but was worried that he would find out that he could read his mind. However, Heroine noticed that Jung-hyuk was staring, so she called him out. And Dokja heard that Jung-hyuk wanted to kill someone, so he immediately distracted him by asking why he left Pildu to do what he wanted. Jung-hyuk pointed out that as a prophet, Dokja should know everything, but he nonchalantly replied that he was not omniscient. So Jung-hyuk used his skill to know if Dokja was lying or not, and that made Dokja annoyed because Jung-hyuk didn't trust anyone. Then Jung-hyuk told him he needed Pildu alive, but Dokja knew he only needed Pildu, not the rest of his gang. That made Dokja wonder why Jung-hyuk spared them, to which Jung-hyuk had no answer. He thought that Dokja was annoying and he wouldn't understand it. Dokja told him things would worsen if he left it alone, but Jung-hyuk didn't care. He intended to leave the room, and Dokja was angry that he wanted to punch Jung-hyuk. And Jung-hyuk dared him to as he activated his self-defense skill. Knowing Dokja wouldn't do anything, he left, taking Jae with him. However, Jae looked back toward Dokja because she knew he was right. She doesn't understand why Jung-hyuk ignored the problem. Dokja opened his notification and knew an hour and a half left before the main scenario ended. As Dokja sat silently apart from his party, he was worried because he couldn't ignore the problems and cursed Jung-hyuk for not considering it. Heroine suddenly mocked him for being afraid of Jung-hyuk, but he pretended to not be scared and told her that Pildu would be a big problem. While Sanga approached Gil-young and his bugs, Heroine wondered why Pildu monopolized the public facility and decided that she would kill all of them. But Dokja stopped her because he knew Pildu was necessary to end the scenario. However, he couldn't stop her because she activated her skill and the scale manifested. But it slowly disappeared, and a notification showed her constellation didn't approve it. Heroine, who has no idea, thinks that her skill is broken. Dokja told her that in order for her to use the skill, the target must be deemed evil by the constellations, and even when humans thought that someone was evil, it might not be the case for them. Heroine was angry because it was nonsense, but Dokja told her there was another way. He told her it was complicated but planned to get Pildu out of his area. Then Dokja explained that the armed zone is Pildu's skill to protect some areas, but everything would disappear if he stepped outside his room. But it will be hard to get him out because he has everything he needs inside. Pildu has the biggest room in the station, and suddenly, a notification appeared stating that there was only an hour until the scenario began. Then Heroine noticed someone was inside the room and was scared that people might take his place. Dokja told his party to talk about it later and started to find rooms too. Suddenly, Bae-young appeared and grinned when he noticed Dokja and his party were at the station too. He snapped his fingers, and a notification appeared in front of everyone. The main scenario is called Safe Zone, and they should enter a safe zone so they wouldn't be attacked by monsters that appear at night for 8 hours. They will get 1,000 coins as compensation, and there's only an hour until it starts. Hyun-sung and Sanga were shocked while Bae-young told them they could take someone's zone if no place was left. People panicked and ran to every safe zone they could find, even some others fighting each other for it. Dokja and his party watched in horror when it all happened. Everyone was killing each other to get to the safe zone, and blood was scattered everywhere. Sanga was worried they had to do the same, but Dokja told her they needed to find a place with enough capacity. He noticed some rooms could only fit one person, but there was a room that could hold 70 people, like Pildu's room. He told his party to find a room that could fit them all, and if they didn't find it, they should regroup in the same place. As his party started to spread, Dokja took his phone. As he read Tessa, he knew no rooms were left and wondered if his party could kill someone. In the meantime, Heroine and Gil-young couldn't find a room empty, nor did Sanga and Hyun-sung. Half an hour left before the scenario started. Dokja silently sat in the middle of people fighting for the safe zone and read his phone. Bae-young suddenly asked him what he was doing, and Dokja realized how dangerous it would be if the constellations could read Tessa too. But Bae-young scolded him for looking at a blank screen for so long, making the constellations uneasy. Surprised, he showed his phone to the ceiling. Bae-young told him he would be dead if he kept looking at a white screen. Dokja couldn't believe that even the Dokubi couldn't see it and wondered what kind of being sent him this novel. Suddenly, someone was screaming, and Dokja turned to look at someone who had killed another person for the safe zone. When Dokja approached him, he threatened to kill him if he came closer. He was startled when Jae approached him and told him that he was too calm. So, Dokja also pointed it out to her, and she revealed that no one would take her room because the only one that could defeat her was Pildu's gang or Jung-hyuk. Jae doesn't want him to die because she starts to like him for standing up to Jung-hyuk, and Dokja assures her that he won't. She wondered if Dokja was as strong as Jung-hyuk as he suddenly appeared and told her to return to her room. Jung-hyuk warned Dokja that he would be dead with his party if they intended to fight the monsters, but Dokja grinned and challenged him instead. He didn't say anything and left. Not long after, all of his party returned, seemingly agitated that no room was left. Pildu raises his rent, and that makes Heroine angry. When Hyunsung asks if Dokja find a room, he tells them that he, too, can't find anything. At last, Dokja told them that they only had two choices, and everyone was curious about them. The first one had a lower risk and could save everyone, but the second choice was not. So, they decided to go on to the first choice. When Sangha asked what it was, Dokja brought them upstairs, where there was a room with 5 people capacity. However, it was occupied and told them that killing all of them was the first choice. Sangha, Heroine, and Hyunsung were shocked by Dokja's decision, but Gil-young was ready to do it if that's what Dokja wanted. Sangha immediately tried to stop Gil-young while Heroine questioned Dokja about it. He told her that those people were killed for that zone, and they couldn't find any before the scenario started. Heroine, on the other hand, tells him that she is already a murderer because of what she did at Jumho. But this does not set her mind at ease. She was angry at him for this choice because she didn't want to be a monster. Then from behind her, Hyunsung asked what the other option was. Dokja smiled and told them that he understood their feelings. Everyone was surprised to hear it, and Heroine lost her anger toward him before she laughed. She hit Dokja multiple times, realizing that he would make them choose the second option. He looked at Gil-young and stroked his hair because no matter what they chose, he would always respect everyone's decision. He then told everyone to listen to him carefully, even if it didn't make sense, because they would risk their life. A notification appeared and stated that there were only 5 minutes left until the scenario started. Dokja told everyone that the monster would appear from the red gateway at the end of the railway. Then they needed to go to line 3 and go up to the surface. Since they can't fight them off, Dokja split into 2 with Hyunsung, Sangha, and Heroine waiting on the railway. When notification appeared and told them that the scenario began, the red gateway slowly disappeared, and monsters started to show up roaring. Dokja told the 3 of them to run straight towards them, adding to run as soon as the monsters started to approach. And even with doubts in their mind, they started running. Before the scenario began, Dokja took a rock and threw it to the front. Immediately the red gateway electrocutes the rock, and Dokja tells them to look along the left wall. And when the monsters were approaching, the 3 of them ran toward it, and Sangha diligently looked at the left wall. Not long after, she noticed it. It was a safe zone sticking on the wall. She immediately reached for it and touched it, and with her hand inside the safe zone, a notification stated that she had found hidden things in the station. The hidden zone immediately activated and protected Sangha and Heroine, but when Sangha turned around, she saw Hyunsung was attacked by one of the monsters. He tried to defend himself using his shield until Sangha used her gold thread and pulled him into the hidden zone. However, the zone could only be occupied by 3 people, and they were worried for Dokja and Gil-young. Dokja knew a hidden safe zone was sticking on the wall, but it'll only activate when the scenario started. He immediately ran away with Gil-young on his back when the monsters approached. When both of them looked back, the monsters were swarming the place, and one of them nearly got to them. But Gil-young managed to hit it with his weapon, and Dokja kicked the monsters on his right while maintaining his balance. Dokja tried to find another hidden zone because he knew there were 3 of them on the platform. But when he found it, someone was already inside. It could only fit 1 person, and that person was scared that his whole body trembled. Dokja kept fighting the monsters along with Gil-young when suddenly Bae-young appeared on top of the man that was in the safe zone. He snapped his fingers and added a penalty that made the zone disappear, and he was mauled by the monsters in a second. When the monsters were swarming the poor guy, Dokja put Gil-young down, and together they prepared to fight the monsters. Dokja was amazed that Jung-hyuk could fight them all night and wondered if he could do the same. He swung his sword, which was charged with energy until it glowed white, and the monster that attacked him died. As Dokja and Gil-young fight the monster with their weapon while covering each other's backs, Gil-young suddenly tells Dokja to leave him behind. Dokja was visibly surprised. He turned to look at Gil-young and easily blocked the monsters that relentlessly attacked him. Gil-young wondered why he helped them when he could leave anytime he wanted. Dokja was stunned by what he said and ignored the monsters that tried to bite him off. Instead, he looked at Gil-young, that bravely fought the monsters, thinking he had no clue why he'd stayed. Meanwhile, Sanga, Heroine, and Hyun-sung were worried because they couldn't see much. Dokja is fine though, holding his sword tightly. He performs his sword technique. In a split second, he released 10 or more slashes to obliterate the monsters surrounding them, stupefying Gil-young, who was left speechless in awe. He lifted Gil-young from the ground and told him that he read a story that ended badly because the main character did that. And as they looked at each other, Dokja knew he was never meant to be the main protagonist. However, he won't let Gil-young die today. Then suddenly, a blue holograph surrounded the box when other monsters approached. Dokja told Gil-young to hold tightly as he opened his bookmark skill and said Namwoon, Hyun-sung, and Inho skills listed. He activated Namwoon's skill, ran toward the monster, and fought them off with his sword and Namwoon's power. He managed to kill every monster in his way while holding Gil-young close to him. He ran away from the monsters, and suddenly he saw an emanating light from a safe zone behind monsters that were ready to kill them. Dokja wouldn't give up, so he stepped forward and jumped high enough that the monsters wouldn't reach him. However, he was surprised, knowing that the zone that could only hold 2 people inside was already occupied by Jung-hyuk. He stood calmly among the dead monsters and then noticed Dokja. Dokja silently cursed his bad luck as he landed and called Jung-hyuk. While glaring at Jung-hyuk, he told him to move because he was strong enough to fight the monsters alone. However, Jung-hyuk, with an attitude, said that he was tired. Dokja doesn't expect Jung-hyuk to know about the hidden zone because, in Tessa, he knew it in his 4th round. His thoughts were interrupted when he knew Gil-young was also glaring at the insolent dude. Jung-hyuk glanced at the kid, and in the end both of them wanted to save Gil-young. Ultimately, Gil-young was in the safe zone with Jung-hyuk, but he wanted to help Dokja badly until Jung-hyuk had to hold him down. While they saw, Dokja continued to fight the monsters. Suddenly he turned because he heard Jung-hyuk tell him that he would die through his skill. But he smirked, indicating that he wouldn't die while the monsters kept swarming him down. But in the end, he got swarmed by their sheer number in a second. Gil-young screamed and called out to Dokja as he disappeared under the mountain of monsters. Gil-young was tearing up as he relentlessly called Dokja, while Jung-hyuk couldn't believe what just happened. He noticed before Dokja was overwhelmed by the monster. He broke the Spectre Spirit Stone and ate it. When Dokja bites the rock, Jung-hyuk doubts that he can use it, and then he gets pinned down and gets lost in sight. A moment later, a blue gas emerged in the middle of the monsters, followed by a loud hissing sound. Gil-young was still calling Dokja when a notification appeared and stated that illusory prison had been activated. Another message appeared, informing Dokja that he had become a ghost species. When he opened his eyes, he got a bad headache, and something caught his attention. Behind him, he saw his memory of when his mom killed his dad. His 4th wall skill was weakened because he became a ghost. His head began to throb as he saw his father lying in the pool of blood, and his mom stood beside him and watched. He saw all of it from behind her and knew he had to fight it, which gave him a bigger headache. Dokja was out of breath when he could finally remove those memories using his 4th wall skill. He was amazed that it still had some powers because other people would be crazy if they tried it. It was a Spectre Stone that he took and considered it a desperate measure because it could bring back trauma as a cost of being temporarily unseen by the monsters. Dokja then opened his notification and decided to wait for the 4th wall to return when suddenly a woman appeared behind him and called Jung-hyuk. She thought that he was Jung-hyuk but immediately knew that he wasn't, while Dokja thought that he might have another trauma that appeared to haunt him. Dokja looked at her and began to suspect something. She looked at him with her left eye glowed red, wondering about his identity. Dokja immediately tried to profile her, but he was alerted that she had used mental barrier skills. But his skill only took a moment to work and summarize her profile. And just as Dokja has suspected, she is Anna Croft. She is the real prophet in Tessa, and one of her abilities is entering someone's mind without limits. Dokja called her by her name and told her he was also a prophet. However, Anna has lie detector skills, and he was caught lying. And as they stood face to face, she demanded his identity. Dokja thought that she must have felt him because his 4th wall skill had been nullified. He thought about what to say next momentarily and asked if she wanted to know him. Dokja told her that he was the one that obtained the ichthyosaur nucleus that Anna now uses in her eyes. She was shocked that he knew about it. And then slowly, his fourth wall skill began to gain its full strength and blocked Anna's vision. She slowly disappeared from Dokja's vision as he provoked her to wait for him before she finally disappeared. Then a notification told him that he was protected from the effects of illusory prison, so he quickly sat, wondering why it took this long. He lay back in exhaustion and thought about his party. He was out of breath, wondering if the scenario was still running. He started to close his eyes, and then he heard someone keep calling him, waking him up. Dokja saw his party surrounding him when he woke up, seemingly out of breath. He immediately sat and worried about the scenario, but his party told him that they survived the night. But when he looked to his left, there were bodies scattered everywhere. He saw two people sitting against the wall, and mentally broke down from losing their party. Dokja told his party that they still had 3 nights to go, and when he tried to stand up, Hyun-sung told him to rest some more. He was glad that the time was still early when Hyun-sung told him the time and wondered where Gil-young was. He was shocked when he saw Yoo-hyuk talking to Gil-young but couldn't tell what they were talking about. He began to wonder, instead of Heroine, it was Gil-young that Yoo-hyuk had seen earlier, and from up close, as Yoo-hyuk glanced at Gil-young, sternly refused his offer to tag along with Yoo-hyuk with a promise that he'll get stronger if he does. Dokja activated his Omniscient Reader Viewpoint skill so he could read Yoo-hyuk's mind, and he was angry that Yoo-hyuk thought so little of him. When Gil-young noticed he had woken up, he immediately ran toward him. As Yoo-hyuk left, Dokja heard that Yoo-hyuk had a plan for tonight, and he wondered what it was while he held Gil-young in his arms. He wanted to hear the rest of it, but he was too tired and began losing consciousness. Suddenly he fell asleep as Yoo-hyuk kept walking away, while Jae started to get curious about him. A notification about the detail of the scenario showed up, followed by a statement that the 3rd day has completed. A few hours later, through his communication skill, Bae-young woke Dokja up. Heroine is the first to notice that he woke up and teased him by pointing out that he slept in Hyun-sung's lap. Hyun-sung kept talking in his sleep about his time in the military, and Dokja suddenly felt like he was back in it as well. Dokja sat, and Bae-young immediately showed him his notifications. Some constellation was curious about his past and gifted him 1,800 coins. Upon seeing it, he was unhappy because he didn't want the constellation to see his past. Then another notification appeared, showing his reward for surviving the night without the safe zone. It shows that he has over 20,000 coins, and he was glad to hear it while he and Heroine tried to put a pillow under Gil-young's head. Heroine asked him if they would do the same for tonight, but Dokja told her it was a one-time thing and proposed that they would end the scenario today. Dokja told her that they first should hunt Pildu, who was still cozily perched in his zone. He then woke Hyun-sung and had a small talk with him, before he pointed out that Hyun-sung had been talking in his sleep and called himself Private Hyun-sung Lee when Dokja knew that he was a commissioned officer. Sanga, Gil-young, and Heroine listened when Hyun-sung explained that he got promoted at the end of his service. Dokja looked at his grim face. He knew it mustn't be easy for him. He smiled and decided that now was the best time to carry out his plan. Dokja told Hyun-sung how grateful he was to have someone like him on board, and Hyun-sung was touched by what he said. He praised him more before walking away. As he approached Sanga, Heroine, and Gil-young, he immediately told them to just do what he just did. Gil-young looked over at Hyun-sung as Dokja explained that it would be nice to cheer him up a bit because he seemed down lately. While in truth, Dokja wants Hyun-sung's attribute to blossom in Jumho, Heroine gets it instead. He needs Hyun-sung to evolve to anticipate Yoo-hyuk and fight Pildu. Hyun-sung was wiping his shield. He was moved by what Dokja said, while the others felt it was the best they could do. Heroine began to wonder if Dokja's constellation was a one-eyed fortune teller. She was referring to Gunjai, who Dokja has no clue who he is and just told her he's good at understanding people. Dokja shrugged it off and told them that they just had to take turns and cheer at Hyun-sung. He called it an intermission scenario titled Well Done, and the first one to do it is Heroine. She sat with Hyun-sung and told him his personality was sturdy like a pine tree. Hyun-sung was happy because of it. When he told her his favorite song, Heroine told him that she had never asked about it, and he suddenly felt sad again. Dokja palmed his face, knowing that Heroine couldn't cheer people up. Then it was Sanga's turn, and she was moved because Hyun-sung was someone that is good and fair. Hyun-sung never thought he would hear something like that and thanked her for saying it. Dokja was happy that she had done it perfectly, and when Gil-young talked to Hyun-sung, he just complimented his appearance, which was enough to make Hyun-sung feel confident. Dokja didn't realize that someone like Hyun-sung could have low confidence, but he was glad that at least it worked. while Heroine was surprised that it was actually that easy. When Gil-young left, Hyun-sung sat silently against the wall, and a notification showed that his attribute was waiting to evolve. As Dokja saw that Gil-young was back, he complimented him for his good work and asked if he would do the favor he asked. Gil-young talked to the bugs on his hair, and told Dokja that Ji-hae was on the first basement floor. He immediately left his party and went upstairs. He wanted to recruit Ji-hae too, but on his way, Dokja met Pildu's gang, but he didn't pay them any attention and counted the safe zone that was in the room. They offered Dokja to join the gang because he was close to Jung-hyuk, but he kept ignoring them as he went upstairs and saw other safe zones occupied by people too. Dokja immediately realizes that the number of safe zones in the station is depleting, and when one of the gang confronts him, Dokja tells him that he'll consider his offer. When he was about to head to the first basement floor, Ji-hae had already pointed her sword from behind, which shocked him. Ji-hae was standing behind him, her blade inches from his face. Apparently, she overheard Dokja's conversation with Pildu's gang and warned about the consequences. She was disappointed that he considered their offer. Ji-hae wasn't lowering her sword and was surprised that Dokja went there to meet her. She lowered her sword, and when Dokja turned, she already disappeared. Suddenly, she sidestepped and appeared on top of the stairs. Dokja went upstairs immediately when Ji-hae asked what he wanted and wondered why she stood there. She told him that Jung-hyuk had ordered her to guard the place and not let anyone in. Dokja was shocked seeing how obedient she was to Jung-hyuk and worried for her that he needed to carry out his plan faster. Ji-hae was surprised when Dokja asked her to help take down Pildu's gang tonight. Dokja stared at her silently while she tried to figure out whether he was serious. When Dokja came back down, Heroine doubted that Ji-hae would help, but Dokja had faith in her that she'll help. Meanwhile, Ji-hae looks at the ground, remembering her conversation with Dokja. He told her that there was a way for them to win if she helped. But it seems like Jung-hyuk had already influenced her, so Dokja told her that he saw her first scenario in her school. She was surprised, and Dokja explained how she had killed her friend and knew she never wanted any of it to happen. Ji-hae hit her sword to the ground and told Dokja to stop talking. She was upset with him for bringing it up, and Dokja explained that he simply said what came to mind. And he added that if she refused to help, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. Ji-hae was crouching on the floor and thought really hard about his word. When Dokja's phone showed that it was already 7 p.m., he told his party that tonight would be more dangerous. Heroine, Sanga, and Gil-young went together and realized that they needed to go as planned. While Dokja was with Hyun-sung and talked about their plan, and Ji-hae was still on the floor, but she finally decided. Their target tonight is to take down Pildu, as a notification appeared, showing them that there were only 5 hours left until the scenario started. Dokja told Sanga and Heroine to take Gil-young to platform 4 as they walked upstairs. Other people that are in the safe zone noticed them. Heroine approached the two men and drew her sword. She lifted her sword behind her back and apologized before she swung it, followed by a loud crash. Meanwhile, Dokja and Hyun-sung were walking the steps when suddenly Hyun-sung called him. Hyun-sung doubts his ability, but Dokja knows everything will fail because he is the center of his plan. So he immediately reassures Hyun-sung as they walk faster upstairs. Then Hyun-sung told him that no military member had relied on him for anything. Dokja wasn't aware of this fact when he read Tessa, and he would like to know more about his story. Hyun-sung immediately stopped mid-stairs, and when Dokja turned, he told him that when they talked, it always felt like they had known each other for a long time. He was visibly happy, but his words were interrupted by Pildu gang members holding someone hostage. They held a woman who pleaded for help. Both Dokja and Hyun-sung were unhappy with what they saw. When Dokja looked at Hyun-sung, his face showed that he was angry. Hyun-sung told them to let her go, and they were too arrogant to listen. He exchanged glances with Dokja, and when Dokja nodded, at that precise moment, Hyun-sung's attribute was ready to evolve. Just like Heroine and Jung-ho, Dokja looked at the gang member that ready to fight him. He knew he had to invest some coins to increase his stats, so he spent more than 2,000 coins to level up his strength and stamina. Then suddenly, a loud crash can be heard echoing through the station, and the gang members are startled. Dokja took advantage of the situation and stepped forward before running at lightning speed toward the gang and slashing one of them in a single strike. The man screamed when he saw that his arm bled profusely, while Dokja told Hyun-sung to run away. Meanwhile, Pildu, that read a newspaper in his room, was startled by one of his men who noticed Hyun-sung and Dokja running toward them with their weapons drawn. Then, Hyun-sung put his shield forward and hit one of them with a loud thud. He activated his stigma and pushed every man that tried to attack him with his shield like a bullet train. While Dokja kept moving forward, he stepped over the line, and immediately, the automated weapon appeared. But it doesn't stop Dokja from charging forward even when the gun is ready to shoot him. After Hyun-sung beat everyone in his way, he called Dokja and threw his shield across the line toward Dokja. Dokja reached the shield in no time and immediately used it to protect himself against the shooting that was aimed his way. All of the shots ricochet with a loud crashing sound. Dokja held his stand as he stared at the weapon behind the shield. When everything stopped, Dokja was surrounded by a huge smoke, but he kept his eyes on Pildu. After the smoke slowly cleared, Dokja unsheathed his sword, enveloped in a blue aura, and he stood still in his place, unwavering by the attacks. A notification appeared and showed that Dokja's strength and durability increased because of the power of his sword. Pildu put down his papers and asked Dokja what he wanted. Dokja's stats were decreased because of Pildu's skill, but he doesn't let it affect him and tells Pildu he doesn't want to be a squatter again. While that happened, Pildu's weapons were still alive and reloading. Hyun-sung noticed the weapon firing and immediately ran toward Dokja. Pildu smirked, watching how Dokja and Hyun-sung didn't run away, but someone came in a rush and his body was injured. Dokja noticed his wound was caused by a sword. When Hyun-sung got to his side, he asked about his condition while Dokja silently listened to the man talking with Pildu. Turns out he was hurt by Jihai. So, Dokja looked Hyun-sung in the eyes and told him this was the right time to do it. Hyun-sung looked at his bare hand, and notification stated that his attribute was evolving. He clenched his fist as a bright golden light enveloped him, indicating the birth of one of the strongest protagonists in Tessa. Dokja's plan to get his attribute to evolve had worked, as he watched it all happen from the side and was amazed by it. A colossal iron hand appeared behind Hyun-sung and covered him. Hyun-sung was one of the strongest characters in Tessa because of this specific power. He is reborn with a new determination and confidence as the manifested hard slowly absorbed. And with that, his great mountain crush stigma fully bloomed. And at that moment, his muscles were bulging so big, ripping his shirt. He screamed loudly as he aimed his fist at the floor, hitting it with a loud boom and broke the floor. Pildu and his gang were shocked when the whole floor shook and started to break. The tile was broken into pieces and thrown into the air, while Pildu's zone was destroyed. His room was devastated by a bright light, and Dokja watched it in silence while Hyun-sung was out of breath after using his power. Hyun-sung suddenly told Dokja that he wanted to hear his story too. With a smile, he told him that he wanted to know him better. Dokja was surprised because he never thought a character like Hyun-sung wanted to know about him. Suddenly, they both heard someone asking for help from the rubble. So, both Hyun-sung and Dokja approached the ruins. When they looked down, they saw Pildu, who survived but was severely injured. Dokja smiled at Pildu and asked to talk with him now that they had no private area. When everything was cleared, the station was in a mess because of the ruins and people injured. Dokja walked among the ruined floor when he noticed Heroine and the others had joined them. Heroine told him that they had managed to destroy every safe zone in the station. From the get-go, Dokja already told them to destroy the entire safe zone, and he and Hyun-sung destroyed Pildu's area. Dokja brightly smiled at them even though his ears were ringing because Byung nagging at him for destroying the safe zone. He told Byung to be quiet because he got many messages from the constellations that he was happy because of his plan. But Byung told him that Chungnyeoro holds many channels and most viewers are thrill seekers. Meanwhile, Pildu was being carried by the rest of his gang that survived, and then Dokja noticed Jihai appeared. She told him that she had destroyed the safe zone that had a higher capacity. Dokja knew his party wouldn't be able to destroy it alone, so he asked Jihai to take care of the bigger zones. And because of that, everyone was angry. Everyone in the station was coming for them. And suddenly, a bounty hunter scenario appears, and everyone gets notified of the details. It was in order to kill Dokja in 10 minutes. Jihai was the first to say that she would not help Dokja with this and slowly walked away. Dokja immediately closed his window and said he didn't need her help. Heroine teased Dokja for putting himself in this situation and told him if the reward was 20,000 coins that she might consider killing him, while Hyun-sung immediately tried to protect him. Dokja looked at Hyun-sung, put his shield forward, and looked at Hyun-sung's profile. Hyun-sung could only use his stigma twice more, then suddenly, more people arrived because they got the hunting scenario. Gil-young flinched at the sight of people surrounding them, but Dokja reassured him that they would not fight them. As his party surrounded Dokja and were ready to protect him with their weapons, he remembers this was the same thing that happened in Tessa when Yoo Jung-hyuk destroyed the safe zones as well. The railway glowed red, and the gateway appeared. A notification appeared in front of everybody that the conditions of the scenario would be adjusted because the safe zones had gone. And then another notification appeared. Everyone has to survive the night against the monster, or they will die. The gate began to open, and the monsters appeared. Everyone was surprised by their appearance and began to flee when the monsters ate one of them. It didn't take long for the station to get overwhelmed by the monsters, and people started to run away. As the monster came swarming in, Dokja screamed, telling the others to go up the stairs, and a moment later, the party managed to go up as something caught Dokja's attention. They stopped in the middle of the stairs when he noticed people following them upstairs too. So, Dokja drove his sword through the stair, and it immediately cracked. He told them that they won't make it even when they went upstairs. The stairs began to shake, and when it exploded, everyone that followed them ran away to avoid the blast. His party watched in horror when Dokja created a big hole in the stairs, and it was impossible for anyone to go there. Dokja told everyone to fight for their survival, and when they looked for another way upstairs, Hyun-sung was already there and used his fist to destroy another stair. Jae-hye was upset about it and confronted Dokja, but he said he got everything under control as he activated his bookmark skill. In his list, he has Namwoon, Hyusung, and Inho skills. Dokja chose to activate Inho's insider skills for 5 minutes. He called Pildu and incited everyone that he could save them. Pildu was angry at him, but everyone started to beg for his help. Dokja told them that the monsters were not many and they could beat them if they worked together. He already knew that the challenge in this scenario was not the monsters but the safe zones. More people started to approach Pildu and ask him for help. When Pildu saw a ground rat in the corner of his eye, he told everyone to gather around. He told them to hold them back while he prepared his private property skill, and everyone began to fight the monsters with any weapon they could find. As someone was about to get eaten, Dokja noticed it and instructed Sanga to help. She used her thread to yank the man out of the monster's reach and pulled him onto the stairs. There's a huge claw mark on his back, but he can still survive because of Sanga. Then his eyes met with Dokja's glare as he tried to get the bounty reward. Dokja asked him about the bounty scenario, but the scenario ended as soon as he finished talking as Dokja smiled as he told the man that he was too late. The man immediately apologized when Sanga, Heroine, and Gilyong bullied him. Right after, Pildu yelled as he activated his skill to summon his Gatling gun surrounding the group while the monsters kept raining on them. His weapon was activated because the monsters stepped over the line, and they were shots immediately. Hyun-sung, that arrived, noticed what happened and was amazed by it, while Dokja was sure that Pildu could survive for a long time because his skill didn't take a lot of power. Monsters were relentlessly blasted, and Dokja told his party to take some time to rest. But Heroine worried about the people below. Dokja smiled at her and said that they weren't lucky enough, while Pildu screamed as he continuously used his power. He gave everything he got, but the monsters kept coming. So, he decided to level up his skills immediately, which made his weapon get bigger, and he earned a barrier feature that could block the monsters from coming closer while his guns kept firing. Dokja watched everything from the stairs and wondered how long Pildu's constellation would have helped him. Jae-hye simply started to mock them, knowing that now the thugs got what they deserved. While Heroine was nonchalantly asleep on top of the stairs after days of running around for survival. Dokja then asked her about where Yoo Jung-hyuk could be, but Jae-hye only told that he was busy. Dokja then revealed that he knew Yoo Jung-hyuk went into the dungeon, surprising her for knowing that fact alone. He estimated that Yoo Jung-hyuk was raiding some dungeon for about 11 hours and suspected something had happened. A moment later, Dokja asked Baehyung to open the shop, but Baehyung was busy expanding his channel. They got into an argument, and Dokja ended up winning as he gave 5,000 coins to upgrade his membership in the shop. Sanga noticed the items that Dokja bought from the shop appeared and wondered what that was. The items were a support contract and recovery potions. Dokja spent 15,000 coins to obtain them. Baehyung was worried that Dokja was about to make another contract, but Dokja reassured him that it wasn't for the constellations. He wrote his name as an employer, and when he finished writing, Sanga still didn't know what was there. As Dokja looked down at Pildu that got weaker, he explained to her that it was a contract that could turn an employer into an employee. The monsters were still there despite Pildu's effort to kill them for an hour straight. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung and Gilyong brought back water and blankets from the restroom. Dokja knew Pildu's constellation couldn't keep helping him, and when it reached out for help, he smiled. He called Pildu, which was being held by someone, and offered him a contract. Pildu and Baehyung were startled by his offer, but Dokja wasn't talking to both of them. Dokja offered potions if the contract was signed. Pildu's constellation, named Defense Master, is confused by his offer, while Baehyung is asking if Dokja has lost his mind because sponsoring the constellation is never heard of. The guns kept firing when Dokja told Baehyung that the constellation was out of coins, weakening Pildu. The constellation world has been destroyed, and his stories are lost to time. Dokja knew that stories are what make the constellations alive. They earned it by spreading their stories through their avatar, and as their stories got stronger, they earned more coins. And when their stories vanished, they're gone with it too. Dokja knew that this particular constellation cared about Pildu. When he began to weaken and unable to stand up, Dokja and Sangha were worried. But Dokja kept waiting silently when Pildu started to cough blood. Suddenly Defense Master responded to Dokja, and Bae-young was shocked to see that the constellation was reviewing the contract. Dokja smiled when his plan of enslaving Pildu was working. Not long after, Dokja was notified that Defense Master had added new clauses to his contract. He asked for protection and improvement in Pildu's skills. But what Dokja wants is the third clause that states that Pildu's properties will be his too. After feeling happy with the contract, Dokja agreed and signed it. Meanwhile, Pildu was getting worse, and his power was depleting when a potion flew toward him. That potion was sent by Sangha while Dokja told him to take it. Pildu grabbed the potion, and he was still angry with Dokja. He unplugged the cork and chugged it down. Once he finishes the bottle, his mana is fully recovered, and as he stands, he wants to take revenge on Dokja, but he tells him to be quiet. Immediately his mouth was shut, and all his men were wondering what had happened. Even Dokja's party were shocked at it. It was authority command that was in the clause of their contract. With a smile, Dokja told Pildu to keep fighting and stay away from his party. Meanwhile, Pildu was still forcefully silenced. Bae-young suspected that Dokja wanted this from the start. Dokja just shrugged his shoulders, and Bae-young was starting to regret his choices. Then he turned and told everyone he had to go. Ji-hai wondered where it could be at times like this. Heroine finally woke up when Dokja told them that he wanted to hunt the one that let them all suffer and give him a good kick. As he read in Tessa, he knew that at a point in time, Yoo Jung-hyuk bore too much pain in a certain dungeon and let his life go for another regression. Dokja couldn't believe that Yoo Jung-hyuk had given up in his 8th regression. While Heroine becomes curious about what he did, she took a peek at what he saw, and when Heroine asked who he was talking about, he told her that the man was so much worse than Pildu. Dokja took Heroine and Gil-young with him as they started to walk again. He reassured Heroine that everyone would be okay because he told Sangha and Hyunsung to watch them. Back then, he told them to give Pildu the potion every 40 minutes. Right now, he was worried about what Yoo Jung-hyuk might do. Suddenly, Ji-hai caught up behind them and told them to wait. Dokja was relieved that Ji-hai was smart and asked to join because Yoo Jung-hyuk could be in danger. He knew Yoo Jung-hyuk failed in his 8th and 11th rounds, and this was his 3rd. They arrived at Daehan Cinema, and Dokja once again asked Ji-hai whether or not Yoo Jung-hyuk went to the hidden dungeon in the first exit. Ji-hai hesitated in answering Dokja, but he knew he was right. If his instinct was right, Yoo Jung-hyuk was in danger when he saw the cinema was surrounded by dark energy. He told them that Yoo Jung-hyuk might already be dead. The cinema was a place for the hidden dungeon scenario, and the place was so dark. A new scenario arrived when Dokja put his hand forward and through the barrier. Everyone was speechless when they saw the place suddenly covered in little sparks, and the scenario ordered them to slay the master of the cinema dungeon. When Dokja read the scenario, he knew he had given all of his power to stop Yoo Jung-hyuk from dying. They went inside, and Ji-hai asked Dokja again if Yoo Jung-hyuk was really in danger. Ji-hai doesn't believe him when he says that it is his job as a companion, but Dokja can't tell the truth. He wants to save Yoo Jung-hyuk because he wants to save everyone. He remembered when his regression count reached double digits. Someone asked Yoo Jung-hyuk what would happen to the world if he regressed. Yoo Jung-hyuk just said that he only had a world where everyone could be saved. As they kept walking, Dokja assured them that he had no hidden motive. He was simply worried about the fate of his world if Yoo Jung-hyuk regressed because there was no mention of it anywhere in Tessa. The place is so empty that Dokja and Gil-young noticed that most of the movie posters were ripped. Dokja asked them to go upstairs, and Heroine and Ji-hai talked about their favorite weapon. They liked to kill with swords and immediately clicked with one another. Heroine looked over Ji-hai's sword and complimented it, while her sword was just created from bones. Dokja felt guilty that he hadn't been able to give Heroine new weapons, and he asked Ji-hai why she couldn't be that polite to him. And then Ji-hai said that she only respects incredible women. Suddenly, something rustled in Ji-young's hair, and he immediately grabbed Dokja. From that alone, Dokja knew someone was with them inside the cinema, and everyone became alert. They heard someone talking upstairs, and 4 men talked about the posters and hidden treasure that lay behind them. Dokja suspected they were from another station and told Ji-hai that every station had its own scenario. Those men probably finished their first scenario so they could sneak there through the ground floor. But what got Dokja is that these men knew about the hidden dungeons and profits when supposedly only he and Yoo Jung-hyuk knew about the future. Suddenly, the 4 men standing in front of a still intact poster were engulfed with blue light before they disappeared. The light also started disappearing when Dokja rushed into it while the others were still shocked. Dokja looked at the torn posters and then at another one that was still intact. He was upset that Yoo Jung-hyuk left the movie a time forgotten by mankind recreated untouched when suddenly the same flash shines on them. Jae and Gilyong were panicked when Dokja asked Heroine if she liked to watch a movie. He told her that she might hate movies after this as they began to disappear. And they slowly went until the light was gone with them too. They arrived at a forest, and Jae was confused. She panicked, seeing that the forest was vast and the wind rustled the tree leaves. Dokja told them that they were in a movie. He thought that Yoo Jung-hyuk probably went first and finished every level in the posters to keep the price to himself. Jae wondered what movie they were in when Gilyong suddenly walked away. Something appeared out of the tall bushes, and everyone was surprised that it was a giant mantis. Jae was the first who wanted to save him, but he grabbed the bug first. Gilyong crouched to the ground to avoid Jae's sword and told her it was an ancient bug. He talked to it while Jae was still surprised that he could quickly avoid her sword. Gilyong suddenly smiled and laughed with the bug while Jae wondered what he was. Dokja just told her that he was like Jean Henry Faber. Gilyong was still talking to the bug when he was suddenly shocked by something the bug said. He called Dokja and released the bug. The three of them immediately noticed that something was wrong. Suddenly a monster took a step, and it was enough to cause the ground to shake like an earthquake. Everyone was panicking. A huge pile of dust appeared between the trees and quickly approached them, as the group from earlier showed up, asking for help. Jae and Heroine recognized them but were shocked by what followed them. They knew it was a Tyrannosaur, and Dokja was filled with conflicted feelings. He knew the bigger the obstacles, the bigger the rewards. The sky resonated with the Tyrannosaur's deafening roar, sending chills down their spines. In a state of panic, Dokja lifted Gilyong from the ground, and together they sprinted away from the monstrous creature. Then after his ear-defeating roar ended, he lifted his hand and crushed the man near it. The ground was destroyed, followed by a loud boom. It continues to trample everything in his wake and kills many men. Finally noticing Dokja and his party. Seeing as they had nowhere to go, Dokja drew his sword and told Jae that killing the Tyrannosaur was the only way to escape. He looked behind the dinosaur and saw the research lab. When Jae doesn't understand him, he says that this is a movie and they should deliver a satisfying ending. The Tyrannosaur roared to the sky, activating its skill to terrify its prey. Dokja was immediately protected by his fourth wall skill, and he told everyone to pan out when he noticed Gilyong activated the Dinosaur Encyclopedia skill. After reading it, he told Dokja that Tyrannosaur has a narrow vision that makes it easy to attack from the sides. Dokja was surprised to know that Gilyong had read an encyclopedia when he was younger. Suddenly the Tyrannosaur charged at them. Dokja was about to tell them what they needed to do, but he didn't need to. Heroine and Jae immediately dashed toward the towering dinosaur with their sword in hand, going for it. The Tyrannosaur has made Dokja its target and immediately tries to eat him. But Dokja just needed to distract it while Heroine and Jae killed it. But suddenly Gilyong offered himself to be the distraction. He activated his skill and tried to convince Dokja that he could fight as green sparks started to glow around him. A mantis can be seen flying above them and quickly approaching them. Then it quickly clawed at the Tyrannosaur's eyes until it roared in pain as its eyes bled. Dokja is shocked at what he sees and becomes speechless. Now, he understands why Yoo Jung-hyuk wants to take Gilyong. He immediately told Jae and Heroine that they were already in a position to attack, as both of them performed a magnificent technique to strike its limb in one single swoop. Meanwhile, Dokja activated the special skill in his sword that was called Ether Affix, and it morphed into fire, and he climbed the Tyrannosaur by its tail. But it felt his moves and began to swing its tail, so Dokja leaped into the air as he pointed his sword at its back. He stabbed the Tyrannosaur and let gravity bring him down so he could cut it deeply. Heroine and Gilyong were worried about him, but he was determined to kill it. He put more mana into the sword, and the flames grew stronger, then started to cut the dino's skin like butter. The Tyrannosaur roared in pain again as fire engulfed its body, and Dokja finally pulled out his sword. He landed beside Jae and watched the Tyrannosaur get burned alive while Gilyong and Heroine were stunned by how good the smell of roasting meat that aired around them. The Tyrannosaur finally died as its skin turned black, and it fell to the ground with a massive crash. Everyone earned 1,000 coins for being able to kill the Tyrannosaur, and when everything was over, Dokja helped one of the survivors. He tried to help him drink some water, but the man was coughing, and blood poured out of his mouth. Dokja knew the man had little time to live, so he immediately asked him how they knew about this place. Dokja was shocked to hear that a group of prophets guarded something called a revelation. Then he was surprised when he knew the man was already dead, and he soon covered his body with leaves. Dokja knew how ridiculous it sounded because Anna Croft is the only real prophet that could see the future. He decided that they should rest for a little bit. With that bit of information, he knew that they were not prophets but someone like him. After a while, Dokja found 20 potions, and it was comprised of stamina, mana, agility, and strength potion. When he glanced at his party, they happily ate the Tyrannosaur's meat, and after they finished, Ji-hai looked at what Dokja was doing. Dokja flinched when Ji-hai suddenly closed by and noticed the potions. She immediately accused Dokja of going to hog all of the potions and called Heroine. Ji-hai asked for the strength potion even when Dokja knew her strength was her greatest point. He didn't want Ji-hai to have any because she was with Yoo Jung-hyuk, so he offered to play for it. He uses his omniscient reader skill when he's going face to face with her. And as they started the game, Dokja already knew how to defeat her. After a while, a helicopter arrived, and Dokja and his party went toward it. As they walked, Heroine couldn't be sure that they had finished the movie, but Dokja assured her, while Ji-hai still wondered why she could lose and get no potion. Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of everyone and told them that they had delivered the desired ending. Heroine was surprised, and Dokja told her that they just needed to kill everything. In the meantime, Gil-young said goodbye to the mantis because he couldn't bring it outside. They could only bring items just like the potions that mostly Dokja owned, while Ji-hai had none. He also got an ampule that will significantly increase his stats, but it only could be used in the cinema dungeon. Dokja stared at it for a while because he knew he couldn't finish the final level without it. Then he held it tight, thinking that if Yoo Jung-hyuk was truly in danger, he had to do everything to save him. Not long after, the helicopter took off with Dokja and all of his party aboard. A notification told them that they had finished the movie and earned 500 coins, and as the helicopter got higher, the forest began to disappear.